Hello there, lovely people. It's Alex from Nintendo Life here, and today we're reviewing for you Sid Meier's Civilization VII on the Nintendo Switch. This review was originally written by little old me. Oh, I had to put some hours into this thing. But anyway, that's more than enough waffling. Let's dive right into things. Most games with numbered sequels tend to iterate and grow on their previous installments. After all, you don't want to alienate your audience by appending key systems and creating a substantially different experience from what they're used to. It just makes sound economic sense. Change things just enough so it rides that line between familiarity and shininess. Firaxis apparently missed this particular industry-wide memo, and thus the Civilization series will happily buck its own trends and well-established ideas in order to deliver something fresh every single time, and that is no less the case with Sid Meier's Civilization VII, which we'll be calling Civ 7 for the sake of my voice. Let's be clear here, it does stick to the same broad ideas as ever, but tried and trusted mechanics have gone out the window, not because they didn't work, but because, hey, it's time to try something different. As with every game prior, Civ 7 has you take on the role of a real-life world leader, each with their own unique bonuses and quirks, looking to explore, expand, exploit, and exterminate, and coining the 4X genre presumably named by people with first-letter blindness. In Civ 7, you're going to need to try and achieve one, or realistically more than one, of 4 goals before your opponents, and these 4 E's we mentioned earlier are the way to do it. Simple, right? No, not right. The reality of the game is that there is a staggering number of ways to achieve your chosen goals, each with the potential to be as nuanced and calculated as a well-played game of chess, or you could go full militaristic and nuke everyone else, declaring yourself the victor by default. However, it'll be a while before you're able to do so, at least with actual nuclear warheads, because Civ 7 changes the previous progression system by introducing 3 ages of humanity. You'll start in Antiquity, which sees you start at the literal birth of your new civilization, with nary but a settler to start your very first city. You'll need to research advanced human technology such as pottery and what to do with animals, and systematically work your way through all the major technological advancements of our species. And there's not much in the way of shortcuts for this, unlike the previous entry in the series and its eureka moments. You're gonna have to work for each and every one of these the old-fashioned way, or steal them from your neighbors. Yes, diplomacy has potentially had the biggest overhaul this time around, mostly requiring you to use the new influence points to better or intentionally worsen your relationship with the other blossoming nations. You can also actually see your leader as well during these moments, which is a nice touch and is surprisingly new for the series. A personal favorite addition to this system is the ability to reject a denouncement from a rival, spending hard-earned influence points to stop a leader from driving a wedge between your people. It's a small addition, but one that makes a formal war feel much more tied to public opinion than simply 2 leaders having beef. Whether that's more true to life or not is debatable. Following the Antiquity Age is the Exploration Age, and the way this change works is a little strange but oddly refreshing. Your cities and towns remain the same, but you may have some of your units trimmed if you don't have enough commanders. Oh, don't worry, we'll get onto those. It's not entirely clear how the system works in its entirety, but the units you do keep will be upgraded to age-appropriate examples. We're still absolutely gutted that our Purabetterers were quote-unquote upgraded to mere horses with blokes in the saddle, but apparently war elephants aren't cool enough to survive into 400 CE, only for them to show up again with another civilization 1,000 years in the future. This transition almost feels like a kind of a New Game Plus moment, where you're sort of starting anew, sort of not. It helps to bookend each third of the game, and stops one player from potentially blasting a satellite into orbit, whilst another is just working out how to make boats not sink. It also gives us the sense that we've completed a game without having to sacrifice an entire weekend, only for Harriet Tubman to declare war on us again, distracting King Xerxes from his honest scientific aims. But the Exploration Age is all about just that. Boats that don't sink. You'll be stretching out beyond the confines of your original landmass into the wide unknown, founding distant new settlements and finding exotic resources. In our first run, we didn't even really check the initial settings properly due to a sudden lapse in competence, and assumed that there were 4 civilizations on the planet, including our own, reaching not only another entire continent, but 2 new leaders. was honestly kind of magical. And this is hardly a new feature, and we ourselves have had it already happen in previous games, but that moment of barely being able to cross a chunk of deep ocean only to be greeted by two new allies stroke enemies, it just took us aback far more than we expected, and more than it logically should. It was a really lovely experience. And after you've done all that explorizing, it's the modern age where the guns and the tanks roam free. You'll be digging up relics from the past, trying to win the space race, developing weapons of mass destruction, the whole Megillah. Tensions are also higher than ever, forcing even the likes of Confucius into building up armies of dive bombers because Catherine the Great suddenly lost all affection for him. In fact, let's talk about combat for a moment. It is almost certainly possible to play an entirely pacifist game should you be skilled enough, but a player who doesn't at least build a defensive force is a fool indeed. Alliances can sour quickly if you make the wrong move or you don't have the right number of influence points to make right what's wrong, and as such, war is, if not inevitable, is at least bloody likely. Previous games in the series had you control each unit individually, and that's sort of the same case here, except it's also sort of not, thanks to the unrivaled blessing of commanders. Commanders can carry up to 4 units or 6 with a promotion and march them across the land faster and much more effectively than they could on their own. They can't fight themselves though, they're just purely a support unit. The end result is that combat and wars are substantially easier to manage and control than in previous games. You're gonna absolutely want to make use of them as well, as individual units can't be promoted as they could in previous games, only commanders. Their promotion tree can make otherwise weak units far more potent than they have any right to be, guided as they are by a competent admiral, captain, or head honcho. It's a shame we can't name them, as mowing down Benjamin Franklin's Roman legion under the banner of the great commander Gromit would be a real point in the game's favor. And no, that wasn't a mistake, we did say Benjamin Franklin's Roman legion, because leaders are no longer tied to their real-life civilizations. You can mix and match as merrily as you like, or you can keep things as clean and historically accurate if you prefer, but you'd be missing out, as certain combinations can produce really beneficial results, or indeed you can pick a somewhat worse combination if you're looking for a really different and nuanced run. You can even jump to the later 2 ages at the very start of a game if you like, skipping all that pesky need to research what rocks are good for. It's all options, and options are good. Unfortunately, the Switch version has slightly fewer options when it comes to setting up a game. Map sizes are limited to tiny and small, no doubt due to hardware limitations, but considering Civ 6 managed far larger map sizes, it's disappointing that there's not even an option here. At least there are efforts to allow crossplay for online games though, right? Right. Unfortunately, our attempts to join an online game were hampered by the fact that other platforms have already had a patch, meaning that the versions of the lobbies we tried to join were incompatible about 95% of the time. Quite irritating. We were able to find an appropriate game eventually, though the game then immediately crashed upon loading the map. Eventually, we did get a successful match going, but getting there wasn't so much a headache as a full-blown migraine. It's a real shame as well, as playing against real people is a much more interesting experience by default. And no doubt this will be fixed in the future, but lordy, it wasn't fun for us. You're likely expecting us to now detail how unstable the game is on Nintendo's hybrid. But in all honesty, it was more reliable than we expected. We had only a single crash mid-game in our 30 to 40 hours playing, although we did happen upon several other crashes at less critical moments, such as loading a saved game or linking a 2K account. I still don't get that one. More than this though, we're sad to report that Civilization VII doesn't really feel as finished as it should. We've encountered numerous bugs with duplicate ghosts of units long past just standing on a tile they were once on, music constantly stuttering and cutting out, controls occasionally misbehaving, causing us to perform actions we didn't want to perform, constant reminders that new resources are available to allocate when there absolutely are not any new resources at all, general UI weirdness, the list goes on. None of these are strictly game-breaking, but it's not what anyone wants to see. The Civilopedia should also be a slam dunk in the game's favor, an in-game resource that tells you how everything works and even provides historical information about nigh on everything within it, but it's almost impossible to navigate. Categories seem arbitrary at best, and you can't even reach the search box without using the touchscreen on Switch, and even if you do manage to type something in, the actual searching, appears to do nothing, and it could be so useful. The series isn't renowned for its simplicity. There are countless systems and resources to keep track of and understand, which is wonderful in its own right, but it needs to be properly explained to the player, which the Civillopedia could do so easily. There are tutorials for first-time players, but certain aspects are over-explained, and others glossed over. The minus button on Switch is a dedicated 2K account button, allowing you to see who's online as well as the info of anyone you're currently playing with. A sensible feature, but one that absolutely does not need to have a dedicated button instead of simply an entry in the pause menu. If this button was used to jump to the dedicated Civillopedia page of what you're highlighting instead, it would be invaluable. But as it is, it's just a confusing bundle of pages. Yet despite all these valid criticisms, we could barely pull ourselves away from it. The UI may be a bit wonky in places, but on Switch, it's much cleaner and better scaled than Civ 6's ballooned offering, particularly when docked. Gwendolyn Christie's narration is a delight, the moment-to-moment gameplay and the thrill of a plan coming to fruition is deliciously rewarding, and the bitter taste of defeat successfully makes you loathe the other leader that caused it, rather than the game itself, which is a very difficult thing to get right. It's also brimming with wonderful little details, like a quote calling back to one of Eddie Izzard's most beloved stand-up routines about flags, a memento that is a real-life stone tablet and one of the earliest examples of human writing that is complaining about the quality of a shipment of copper, a similarly real stone with catch engraved on it. It's overwhelming fun to anyone with a love of history or prehistory or British stand-up. Performance on Switch is a little bit mixed. Much like its predecessor, the uncapped frame rate will perform buttery smooth when zoomed right in, reaching up to the maximum of 60 frames a second, but it's a fool's dream to believe you'll get that during normal gameplay. Generally, you're going to expect between 20 and 30 frames a second, varying quite dramatically. Due to the game's turn-based nature, this isn't a deal-breaker by any means, and aside from a few wonky models, the game actually manages to look rather nice, with plenty of detail to feast your eyes on when you're zoomed right out. There's an outstanding game in Sid Meier's Civilization VII that is just waiting to burst free, but is trapped under a wet, slimy coating of bugs and a mostly finished interface. What we have on Switch is a phenomenal game that could be one of the absolute finest in its genre, a true monolith of game design and a delight for all fans of turn-based shenanigans, but its laundry list of launch day bugs and issues pulls it from the peak it could have reached. It's great as it stands, but with more development time, it could have been utterly seminal. Sid Meier's Civilization 7, you're getting an 8 out of 10 from us. You've reached the end of the review. That means it would be time for Alex's personal thoughts, but I wrote the review, so I'll just expand upon a few things that I didn't get to cover. I love this game. I think it's absolutely superb, but it is being dragged down by these bugs and issues, and it is such a shame. The gameplay and the balance of the game is utterly superb. The changes they've made, I think, are nearly all for the better compared to Civ 6. And things like getting rid of builders, like, you know, it's not like a huge thing, and the way that your city expands is quite different as well. You can't just buy tiles anymore. And I think it's not necessarily absolutely 100% better, it's just different, and I think it aligns more with my own personal sensibilities. And that's what's so nice about the Civ series, is that each game is different. You know, there's no good reason to skip out on a game because you think, oh, it's just going to be like the old one. Everyone's different, and that's so much fun. The actual list of issues that I feel are down to game design or like game balancing is quite small, actually. I mean, the Civillopedia is a mess. You know, that doesn't deserve any credit. It deserves some credit because the text is there and you can read it, but you just can't find the page you're looking for. I honestly think the only like design thing that I have a real issue with is espionage, because like if you catch someone doing espionage against you, you'd think, oh, well, they fail then, don't they? Nope, they're guaranteed to get it. You just get some influence points, and it's like, no, I caught the person doing the espionage. They shouldn't get the thing that they were stealing. It's not like a slap on the wrist and off you go with our state secrets. And even though I'm sat here recording the review and I don't need to go back to the game to review it anymore, I'm wanting to load it back up again. I'm wanting to do another run. I'm wanting to see if I can do that proper pacifist run, because I think I can. I think I've got a plan, but I just need to put it into action. And it'll only take 15 hours of my life. It's a game that sucks you in, and it does it in the best way possible. It's just annoying that it's tainted by these bugs just rearing their little tiny buggy heads. Like, why are you here? Why didn't you just release the game later? I don't know. You never know what really happens behind closed doors when it comes to this stuff, unless people come out publicly with it. But I think with more time in the oven, we could have been looking at something absolutely seminal here. But as it stands at launch, it is just really, really bloody good. Ooh!